Hey everybody, welcome. Welcome to another episode of the SaaS Founder Show. This is Tony Zayas. I'm joined by Insivia's founder, Andy Helko. How's it going, Andy?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you, Tony?
Yeah, doing good, doing good.
Are you getting ready for Christmas yet? Did you put up your lights?
You know what? My wife is one of those that dives right into it as soon as Halloween is over. So we got decorations up all throughout the house already. So, yeah.
Pretty fun.
All systems go. How about you?
Oh, we're already in the Christmas season.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, very cool. Today's episode, this is the 8th episode we've done. I think we've had some really great conversations with some fascinating SaaS founders, and I think we have another one in store here today. We'll bring them on in just a second, but we have Mike Arsenault from Rejoiner. So with that, Mike, how you doing?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Doing well.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking out the time.
You got it.
Joining us here today. So just to get started, Mike, we've had a number of founders who had essentially startups. They were early on in the last few weeks, and something that's kind of cool about you and Rejoiner is you guys have been around for a while. So do you mind just telling us a little bit about Rejoiner, and we can dive
yeah, for sure.
And all that. But.
For sure, yeah. So I founded the company like 8 years ago. It's hard to believe. Time flies.
Mm-hmm.
But we're an e-commerce marketing automation platform. So we work with direct-to-consumer retail brands, and we power all of the ways in which they use email to communicate with their customers. And so our product integrates with all of the e-commerce platforms you've heard of: BigCommerce, Shopify, WooCommerce, all the big platforms. And the product is designed to really power email throughout the entire customer lifecycle. So all of those automated use cases that retailers and brands use, high volume, high scalability broadcasting. So really, it's a single solution to power the entire email channel for our customers.
That's fantastic. What was the process? What got you into starting and launching this business? What was kind of the origin story, as we like to call it?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So the original idea, the original product was much smaller than what we do today. So it was really about solving one very specific problem that I had at a company that I worked for previously. And actually, we built the first version of the technology while I was working for another company full time. And that initial problem that we set out to solve was it had nothing to do with retail, had nothing to do with e-commerce. But I was working for another software company at the time, another SaaS company that had a self-service sign-up flow. And so, we would drive a lot of paid traffic into the funnel. People would sign up. It was like a virtual phone product called Grasshopper.com. And we started to see all this drop off on our sign-up form. People would start signing up. They'd fill out the first step of the sign-up form. Now remember, this is 8 years ago. This sounds like pretty basic stuff now, but there wasn't a good solution for this at the time. And we weren't really sure why that drop-off was happening. And so we built a really small piece of technology that could track when someone started filling out a form but didn't complete it. Mm-hmm. And so we started to gather all this data about these prospects who were getting right to the bottom of the funnel, really, super high intent, but they weren't, buying for whatever reason. And so, we started to capture all of these prospects that ended up being, really valuable. And so, first we weren't even doing anything with the data. We were just trying to understand where the drop off was. But that first piece of technology that we built ended up being the basis for Rejoiner's cart abandonment offering, which is obviously a hugely important thing for e-commerce companies and retail brands. So, we started solving this very small thing. We commercialized it. We didn't know what was going to work in terms of follow-up at first. Should we email these people? Should we call them? Should we try to send them direct mail? So we tried a bunch of stuff to see what would work. And then obviously email was the most scalable and converted in the most compelling way. And so we ended up commercializing what was just a very simple cart abandonment solution, not even knowing who we were going to sell it to. Initially, I thought we would sell it to other software companies just like us. But then we started to get all this organic pull from the world of direct to consumer e-commerce. And, once that started happening often enough, we kind of just doubled down and said, okay, if we're gonna do more, if we're gonna expand on this initial use case, we're gonna do it for direct to consumer e-commerce brands.
What was that process like going out of Grasshopper into your own business? Were you able to easily do that, or what did that transition look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was really lucky because we built the tech basically for Grasshopper to use. They had, dedicated internal resources to helping us test it. We built part of it like on their time with their insight, right? But the thing I got lucky with was that Grasshopper also had this brand value that was about empowering entrepreneurs. Like, so they marketed this to the prospects and customers that they sold the platform to. And so the founders there were super supportive. So, basically once this like turned into something that appeared like it had some legs, like that it could go somewhere and that we could build a business around it, they were like 100% on board. And, they let me out of like, you sign these crazy non-competes when you join a technology company that basically says, if you create anything on our time, right, that we help you prove out, it's ours. Like we own the IP. Yeah. So, they let me out of that, and they were hugely supportive. So like the founders there, David Hauser and Siamak Tagados, they went on to have huge success and sell that business to Citrix, to LogMeIn and Citrix, and they were hugely supportive.
Yeah, that's amazing. You don't typically see that type of thing, these days. So really great. So how is that different for you? Did you end up bringing on like co-founders? Did they help fund the initial process? What was the first like year like in your entrepreneurial experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I founded it with two coworkers from Grasshopper, initially, two technical co-founders. And so, we worked together nights and weekends and before work and after work for like legitimately an entire year before we had something to sell. So a lot went into it. And then we said, okay, like we've got this really interesting thing. We're going to go try to do the accelerator thing. And so we applied to Techstars in Boston. We got pretty far down that track. Didn't make it. Then we applied to Y Combinator, went out to California, got interviewed, got pretty far down that track. Didn't make it. So then we were kind of like faced with the question. My two co-founders were older and they both had families, and we're still kind of like bootstrapping this thing, and it ended up just not working out for them to continue just because there wasn't an option for them in terms of being able to support their families and what they needed. So after the first year, they ended up both moving on, and I kind of had this. This is 8 years ago, so I'm 24 at the time, and I really have nothing to lose at this point. So I've got like half a product, no team, no co-founders, and I decided to just kind of take the leap and go for it and see how far I could take. With what I had to sell, I wanted to see how far I could take it. And so basically I sold this like half-built thing to as many people as we could and just tried to, keep learning from the customers that were using it to see where we could go next. I outsourced the engineering team. So we had like a engineering team in Poland for the first few years that just like, we were just like scraping by with whatever we could get.
That's awesome. I think that's such a great story, and just, the trials and tribulations of it's not as easy for everybody, and how do you do it?
Yeah.
So what in that first year and kind of that process, what was your, I like to look at the emotional state a little bit, like where was your mind throughout this time? And then what was, one or two of the biggest challenges you faced and in that period as well?
Yeah, I think the mindset for me at that time was probably a combination of being like completely naive about what it was going to take to make it work. But also like completely blinded by ambition, like in a bad way. Like there was probably multiple times where I should have stopped and like revisited the situation. Do you know what I mean? But when you're young and you have nothing to lose and you're getting like some positive signal from the market that it could work, it's like when you hit, it's like I'm a terrible golfer, but when I hit one good golf shot in a round, like that's enough. Like it's like
Yep.
I'm gonna keep playing. I'm gonna keep going out there. So it was like I was getting just enough to continue. I'd get like one break every quarter and be like, okay, like I think we can make this work. So it was like just that was sort of, allowing us to press on. And then like, from a challenges perspective, I mean, everything you can imagine, right? So it's like, we don't get funded, the co-founders bail. I'm 0 for 3 with co-founders. I found a new co-founder who's actually one of our customers, early customers. He comes on, that doesn't work out. So yeah, I mean that first couple of years was rough. I mean, it's funny. I have a tax return from the first year. I made like $12 or something. Like I should frame that. I feel like.
I was gonna make a joke that you paid more money than Trump, but
Right.
I won't even go there.
Right.
Well, it's funny, the golf shot analogy. I actually use that same thing all the time. It's like, you have all these horrible shots, but that one great chip shot like keeps
you coming back. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
And it's funny, I've had my business 18 years and people have asked me like, how do you keep going? I'm like, I'm kind of like Wile E. Coyote at times where
Right.
you run off the cliff and as long as you don't look down, you just keep moving forward, right? So
just stay alive, right? Like that's the mantra.
I love it. And I think that's what makes a great entrepreneur. You talk about like, oh, I should have gone back and reevaluated. I think there's something to that idea of, perseverance. That's such an important part of creating success.
Yeah.
And so that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So how did you, in that initial time, how did you, get feedback and evolve the product and decide, how to evolve both your target market as well as the feature set in the product?
Yeah. I just started listening intently, target market happened like naturally, right? Because we started to get like people reaching out to us, like potential partners and agencies who wanted to resell the solution. So it's like, okay, like how are they thinking of reselling this and to who, right? So that's a good indicator. Then organically, we started to generate a little bit more revenue. So then we started experimenting with paid search and content marketing. And it's like, okay, let's put some stuff out into the world and kind of like see who shows up, like who's searching for this stuff. What do they want? What are the use cases we needed to deliver on? So we kind of like tested the market with paid a little bit at first, just to see what would come in. So that was a lot of D2C. The time, or at least a lot of e-commerce use cases. I don't even think the term D2C wasn't really around back then, but now it's now it's more fashionable. And then the feature set, right? It's like we just started listening to what people were asking for, and like it's super painful in the beginning because like people come into the product and they're like, this sucks, like it doesn't do like half of what I need it to. And even what we said it did, like didn't do it particularly reliably. So it's like every early user is just a learning experience to try to like iterate and make it better and have it work the next time someone signs up. Because like in the early days, it's not going to work a lot, and it didn't. So it's really just opening up like those opportunities. That was key. Like, I would call everybody who signed up. I would try, no matter what, I would try to speak to the person to understand like where they're coming from, what are they looking for, what are we missing. And then you end up with like a 25-page Google Doc with all this insight from these conversations. And you can kind of like say like, okay, now you can start ranking things that are recurring. And that's really what guided the early product roadmap for sure.
I was going to ask, Mike, that's interesting that you picked up the phone and you actually called customers up. I think that's great. I was going to ask what guided, or like what was the method of gathering that feedback? So you did, phone calls, but did you also take like customer support tickets and things like that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if it's just me and like 2 developers in Poland who aren't around during US business hours, like, for that first couple of years, you're doing everything. And
Right.
yeah, support tickets are great because, that's like somebody who's like in pain and they're like trying to figure something out and they can't, and it's not working. And like, that's like, even to this day, I still answer tickets. And I encourage everybody on our team to answer tickets because it's like, that is the gateway into the friction.
Yeah.
Right. And like, if you can socialize that friction, like especially with our product and engineering team, if you can make people feel the pain of the user on the front line, I think you end up creating a higher quality experience, a higher quality product because it's rooted in like reality. It's not like some imaginary thing that we were building that we think someone's going to use in this way. It's like, no, this is like what people are getting hung up on. And a lot of the time it's like things you didn't even think of initially.
Oh, that's great. I love that. I love that idea of, getting that product team to understand the pain. I think that's just
totally
advice.
Yep.
Speaking of,
usually they're like 3 steps removed. You've got a support team and then you've got a product manager and then it goes down to developer. I love, trying to really expose that, like you said, friction and pain right to those people.
Yeah. And that was like a total, that was another thing I was lucky to have experienced at Grasshopper is that we had 24/7 support that we outsourced to a third party. And like this amazing team of people supported all of our customers. Like in the main HQ, there was like maybe only 1 or 2 people that were exposed to that incoming support. So it was actually like, it was never a positive thing, right? It was like our engineering team was somewhat isolated from all of this extremely rich feedback that was coming in on the support front. And like, we would meet every month and like talk about what the problems were, but it was like, I would chat with the support folks and like, it was like a gold mine of information. I was like, it was amazing. And so I started Rejoiner, even at a very small scale. I was like, okay, like we need to create a system that allows, everybody to play a role in supporting customers and understanding, where the issues are.
I was going to ask a little bit about your past history prior to Rejoiner, because I think it's interesting. You had that product manager role, other SaaS businesses. I'm just curious. So that's obviously one takeaway that you got. Are there maybe a couple others that just helped you accelerate and get to the faster with Rejoiner based on your experience?
I had like the coolest job at Grasshopper. I was a PM within like this skunkworks. Like Grasshopper was like this really successful product that we sold to like thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs. It was like a virtual phone system kind of thing. And when I started there, the founders said like, okay, cool. Like we've got all these customers, we have all this brand affinity. Can we start building other products to sell into the Grasshopper base? And we're going to call it Grasshopper Labs. And it's going to be like this small team of people. It was remote. So that's where I got my first taste of building remote engineering teams. And we're going to like just try to build a bunch of stuff really quickly and see what works. So it was like, we were prototyping all kinds of ideas really rapidly. And so I got to work on some really cool stuff. I worked on Chargify, which is a subscription billing product that's gone on to do really well. They raised like money from Mark Cuban, ended up getting acquired by Scaleworks. They're like still going strong. I worked on a product called Spreadable, which it did okay, but we ended up shutting that one down. I learned a lot there. And then my last one that I worked on was Grasshopper for iPhone. So it was like, we didn't have a mobile app at the time. So it was like, we built that in labs. I learned like a lot about building teams, rapidly iterating. That's where I got my first taste of doing like qualitative customer research. It's like, that's where the pick up the phone thing came from. Doing research like that. I mean, I think one of the major breakthroughs at the time, like with Chargify, I remember this was like when it was actually easy to rank for some of these high intent search terms organically. and doing keyword research and developing landing pages and content and like shipping a marketing site that like literally ranked within a week for like terms like subscription billing, which is like completely crazy. And this is 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But I took that with me when I founded Rejoiner, and from the very early days, organic and paid search have been something we've focused on, a lot. And it's something that, now it takes a really long time to scale that up, and it's a very different climate to do that kind of thing. But like, even when I started Rejoiner, it was still possible to rank with a reasonable amount of effort for some really important search terms. So it was like, that was a huge takeaway.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's amazing to be in that scenario in a startup like Grasshopper and have the chance to, really try new things and learn that quickly.
Totally.
Was there any one single experience or lesson from all those different products that was just like a beacon for you, if you will, as you have moved on, like something that was just like a big aha moment during that time?
They were all very different.
Yeah.
And maybe one of the main takeaways was like, what is, trying to answer like, what is successful? Right? Like that was always a really interesting conversation internally, because like we had this one product that was like generating millions and millions of dollars in revenue and had tens of thousands of customers. And then we're trying to build new stuff that like, SaaS is a slow ramp, and a lot of times we were comparing the success of these things that we were testing to the success of the, sort of the flagship. And it wasn't always clear what was successful and what wasn't. You know what I mean? Because we had this huge thing over there that's growing really quickly. But like Chargify is a good example of where we had one of these conversations, and it was like, it ramped at the same rate for years and years. And I'm sure things have accelerated, but like I took that with me. Maybe that's part of the reason why I continued with Rejoiner, right? Is like, it just takes a while to get rolling, man. It's like, 8 years later, here I am, like, and I'm still learning stuff every day. And it's like, I don't know, maybe, the journey never ends, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's just a slow ramp upwards, and like, that's okay. And I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs get hung up if the success is not immediate. But like, I was able to observe this early on, where it's like, man, it takes a long time to figure out what you're doing, right? Like, under 8 years later, I still don't know what I'm doing a lot of the time. So it's like, I think that was an important lesson. It's like, man, it takes time.
I'm kind of curious to explore that a little bit, and the kind of thought process of success, because I agree with you. A lot of folks, when I meet SaaS founders early on, what their idea of success is and what pressure they put on themselves versus folks that maybe have been doing it for a while and what they consider success. And I know it's different for everybody, whether it's an exit or is it building a lifestyle. Is it the journey versus the destination? So I'm kind of curious to hear that from your perspective of like, what does it mean to be successful or happy or any of these things?
Yeah. Oh, I love this topic. My sort of high level perspective, and I'm speaking for myself here, right? Is like, I got into entrepreneurship not to be wealthy. I got into it to be free. Right? Like, I got into it to write my own ticket, and have success or failure be directly attributed to my efforts, right? And like, so for me, the goal was always freedom, not like an exit, not some measure of wealth or anything like that. So, I've been doing this for 8 years now. We're doing well, and we've got an amazing team of people, and you start to ask yourself these questions again, like, okay, like I kind of achieved freedom, right? I've got a great life and a great family and a great business and a great team. I love working with our customers, but like, what do we do next?
Right.
So, that logic may be flawed in itself. You go search for this other thing. Maybe, you realize that you had it all along, but I think like if more people thought about entrepreneurship like that, it's a long game in search of freedom and being in control of your own destiny. Man, I think a lot more people would get into this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of like how I think about it at a high level.
Yeah, and I generally think, the whole journey versus destination. I'm in a entrepreneur group where I meet with the same folks month after month, and we've actually been having that conversation a lot lately. There's some guys in the group that, this vision of I want to exit at this number of dollars, and these guys are doing this, and we've had a lot of conversation in the last couple of months about journey versus destination and which one's more important. I'm a bit in the journey mindset, but it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like the eggs, like the whole, the wealth creation and the big exit and the press and like being able to put a win on the board and say that you sold the company. That's a very powerful motivation for a lot of people, right? So if that's what helps you press on and get through and like work through the inevitable challenges that you're going to encounter, then, more power to you. Those have not been the things that have motivated me historically, but every founder is different. Right. And so it's like, whatever works.
Yeah. And even the reason the conversation ended up coming up, one guy, he's had his business for a number of years and had a target exit in mind, and COVID cut his business in half.
Yep.
And it's this, and he's sitting there going, wow, my vision and my future and everything I imagined is like kind of gone.
Yeah.
So, that's why I think for some founders that face like big challenges in their, experience, and that was going to lead me to a question for you is, when you hit those moments, because all of us do, where it's just a lot of pressure, a lot, fear. How do you get through those times? What's your approach?
Well, my wife would tell you that she's the sounding board. She's been on the roller coaster with me since the very beginning. Actually, when I was still at Grasshopper. So, she's seen it all. I think. I've been lucky. I've had a small network of peers informally that I can go to and get, kind of gut checked a little bit. If I'm thinking some catastrophe has happened and I'm in panic mode, I can reach out to a couple other people who are in a similar situation to me as founders who are building technology companies. And they're like, yeah, man, actually, that's not really that big a deal. Don't worry about it. So having that peer network, I think that peer network is even more important now, right? As like, you're not in the same room with anyone primarily now. So it's like, and I mean, being a founder is a lonely job anyway, right? Even as your team grows, it's like being a CEO is a lonely job. And so having a peer network of other people that I could go to and have conversations and get reality checks has been important.
Yeah, that seems to be a common theme, and I think for me, what I've seen is folks that are successful always do have that peer network. And it's the folks that seem to struggle the most are probably the ones that don't want to get feedback from others and don't like that idea.
Totally.
How'd you find that network of peers?
Hey, Andy, sorry, the audio cut out a little bit there. Could you repeat that last question?
Yeah. How did you find your network of peers? How did you build that,
Yeah. Well, early on, I was creating a lot of content and putting it out into the world. And I'd actually, at Grasshopper, I'd written like this very thorough post-mortem of why we shut down one of our products. And, I put that out into the world and got really a lot of interesting feedback. But like, actually 2 founders who I'm still connected with today read the postmortem, and they were like, hey, I'm building something similar. It's not like exactly what you did, but it's like similar, selling to a similar group of customers. And like, would you like advise us? And, I think like the moral of the story is like, so yeah, that's like where some of these early relationships came from. But like putting a failure out into the world in a transparent way so that other people can learn from it, I think is a very powerful idea. There are companies that are doing this like to the maximum degree now, like Buffer and Baremetrics, and some of these companies that literally put it all out there,
Right.
Good and bad. And I think Groove is another one. Like, I think people really identify with those stories, like being able to see peek behind the curtains. Like, but for me, it was like writing about things that didn't go well. And then that attracted people are attracted to the transparency, and you're like, hey, like we can learn from each other. And that's like what the start of it was for me.
Getting into that a little bit, what is your mindset on sharing, both publicly and with your team, the hardships and failures as well as the successes? Some people try and hide that stuff, not only to the public, but also to even their team, versus other folks that seem to be very open and honest and frank about business.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Publicly, I need to do a heck of a lot better of being out there in the community and doing things like this and writing about the process of building our business and the problems that we're facing. We've been building a new version of the product for the last few years. That's been like my main focus. And so I kind of put my head in the sand a little bit, which I think was the mistake, like got off social, kind of stopped paying attention to tech news, stopped being part of the conversations like on Twitter. And so it's like, I kind of like said, okay, I'm going to take a step back from all that and focus on building for a little bit. So that's like, and I'm not sure that's for the better, right? I think if I had to do over again, I wouldn't have done that. But on the company side, I believe I'm at the end of the spectrum that is 100% transparency. So like all of our staff knows our numbers, good and bad. We start every company meeting on Friday with wins and losses, talk about what didn't go well. How are we going to get better next week? So yeah, we've had some really hard conversations over the last couple of years with the team, but I feel like, great teams are kind of forged in times when things are not going well, right? If everything is always great, it's like, or everybody thinks everything is always great, it's like, I don't know. I think that, the team members don't build a strong connection. There's not like, it doesn't build any trust, right? Because you got to get through some bad stuff together, in order to really trust each other. And so it's like the transparency starts at the top, and then I think it cascades down to everybody else.
And have you had those people embrace that, or is there certain people that embrace it and it goes well, but others that don't belong on the bus at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like with transparency comes, it stresses people out. And some people, I'm not sure it's a good thing for them, because it's like it creates anxiety. And they're like, oh my gosh, we just had this company call and like a lot of stuff's not going well. So maybe I should like start looking for another job. And that's like a real thing.
Yeah.
But I think the greater good is more important. And you just have to be aware of who is going to be negatively impacted by transparency, and then make a point to follow up and be like, hey, like, I know that was some heavy stuff we just talked about, but I want to make sure like you're all right. And I want to make, reassure you that like, we're in good shape. But yeah, I mean, it definitely happens that people get stressed out.
Yeah, I've found over the years, I mean, it's such a mixed bag. I like being very transparent, and challenge excites me to find opportunities to make it better. But then there are folks that it just, that is it really shakes their confidence. And there's all kinds of issues or they freeze up, and it's
Yeah.
always a challenge. So
Yeah, I think the benefit is greater though. It's like for people that it has the opposite effect on, it stimulates ideas. I think people become more proactive if they realize that there's a negative situation that they can help correct, or at least they have a thought process on how to correct it. And so I've always found the benefit is far greater.
And I would have to think in the startup world, you want those folks that can understand that there are challenges, there are
Totally
ups and downs, because welcome to the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you come work for us, you're not signing up for like, some corporate gig where you can kind of just coast along.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
So, Mike, we had a chance right before we went live, but to talk a little bit about your team, since you're referencing them. What does the team look like? And I know you said that the team is remote.
Yeah.
How's that evolved?
Yeah. So we are remote. Like I said, I had some experience coming into this building remote teams, building software with remote teams at least. But when I founded the company, I thought we were going to stay. We founded in Boston. So we set up an office in Boston for the first year in the South End, and that was really cool. And like, I thought if we went down the funding road that we would do the typical, have an office in a major tech hub and like have a bunch of people working in a cool loft, and like, it didn't work out that way. So as the team grew, it was hard to compete for engineering talent in Boston. That was the other thing, right? Because we have like Google, Amazon, Microsoft. So we started hiring people who it was clear they valued something different, which it was interesting. It actually ended up being very closely aligned to my sort of spiel about freedom there a little while ago. It was like the people who gravitated towards us wanted to be able to live wherever they wanted and work whenever they wanted and have flexibility. And, none of those things are afforded when you have to live in a major city for work, right? And so we started hiring people all over, closed the office in Boston eventually. Team continued to grow. We're still small. We're like 15 people, mostly on the East Coast. And yeah, so we adopted a remote culture like after year one, pretty much, and have been that way ever since.
Yeah, and I actually think, and I'm curious your thoughts of everything that's going on with COVID, and they're talking about in tech hubs that folks are moving out. I almost think that's going to make it easier for startups.
Totally.
Because I even know we're out of Cleveland, and you hear these stories about startups here saying, well, I've got to go to Boston or San Francisco or these other places. And yeah. I think this is, this will be a great catalyst for people saying, okay, that's not as important as it used to be.
Oh, I think it is the catalyst. I think everything has changed.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is a significant enough percentage of young, talented knowledge workers who no longer think it's cool to live in a major metro. And that's going to open up all kinds of possibilities as these folks disperse into other parts of the country. And obviously the technology is going to accelerate to support this now, right? Like the technology was always kind of around. It's been possible to build remote teams, but now there's like all this money flowing into this kind of enablement to allow teams to work together from anywhere. And like, that is not going away. So to your point, I think it's going to stimulate all kinds of entrepreneurial opportunities, not only to enable the ecosystem, but like to start a company in any space. It comes with challenges, right? Like building remote teams is not perfect. And I was saying to Tony earlier, like, especially for extroverts, right? Who really get their energy from being around other people. But I think there's ways to help with that. But yeah, I think it's forever changed for sure. And I think it's for the better.
What else? Are there any, I'm just kind of curious about this. We've been talking a lot about the past state, but future state, not only of kind of the software world and building platforms, but also for you and your product. What do you see happening in the next couple of years?
Oh my gosh. through all this negativity, I think that's probably the most positive thing to have come out of this is there was a big shift going on, which was traditional brick and mortar retail transitioning to direct-to-consumer e-commerce. And I believe this whole situation probably accelerated that by 10 years. Not only new brands that are coming online, but also existing brands that are now more focused on digital. And I think the evidence of that is like one of Shopify's Q2 quarterly report, the number of new stores created in Q2 2020 went up by 70%. So if and Shopify is sort of the market leader in the platform world, right? And so that's an important leading indicator for us. Like, we sell tools to direct to consumer retail brands. And what's crazy is like, even with that explosion of brands, e-commerce still only represents 16% or so of total retail sales. So the pie is going to continue to get bigger as this transition happens. So it's like, I think it's transformational for brands who will now, when started, be digital first. I don't think they'll even think about going wholesale or going direct to brick and mortar first. I think it will be about finding your customers yourself before you do that. I think brick and mortar retail will continue to be a part of it, but I think every brand will start online first.
Yeah, and you see that in the social media trends. You hear about these folks that are on YouTube, build an audience, and then create a product.
Totally. We see it every day. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And people you've never heard of that are like, they show up and they're like, yeah, I have 15 million followers on Instagram and I've got 5 million subscribers on YouTube. And like, I want to launch a consumer packaged goods company, like into that audience. And like, we see like one of those a week now. It's crazy.
Wow.
The tools have been completely democratized for audience building. And if you can create content that people gravitate towards, like you got a business.
How do you see, like, there's been so much, you've been doing this 8 years, Shopify wasn't around. I actually remember BigCommerce. We had used them when they were Interspire and out of Australia years ago. So a lot has changed in 8 years. How do you see that market of e-commerce and the technologies, not only now, but where you see it going?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's obvious it's changed a lot since it was far more fragmented 8 years ago. There might have been, 6 platforms that mattered. And honestly, now there's only one that matters. I think Shopify has one. BigCommerce is still a good product, but Shopify has so much momentum right now. I don't see how anyone could unseat what they're doing, or maybe there might be an opportunity for some platform to come in and sort of like niche down and segment out their basic customers with a more specialized solution. But I think Shopify won the platform war from our perspective. And you see it like with our customers who are migrating. Maybe they were on Magento, maybe they were on WooCommerce, maybe they had built something homegrown. In the past 24 months, we've probably seen 40 migrations to Shopify or Shopify Plus. And it happens really fast. It's like super efficient. It's just like, hey, like one day we're replatforming, like the new site's going to be live in 3 weeks. Like that's pretty amazing. If you can, for an e-commerce build 8 years ago, that would take 6 months. We have established brands who are replatforming like at rapid pace.
Right. What about your product? Where do you see the evolution of your product over the next year and a half?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 important changes that we're investing in. The first one is that we've differentiated ourselves over the years by being way more involved on the services front than the typical ESP. So we do things like copywriting, design, template development, QA. So essentially what we've done is we've built an agency alongside the platform. And as the platform has matured, we see an opportunity to open it up on a more self-service basis for brands that want to come on and just get spun up, and they've got a good idea of what they want to do, and maybe they have internal creative resources that are available. So we're going to open up a self-service channel for people to use the platform on their own. That's an important one. And then I think the other big one is channel expansion, right? It's like we've got a great foothold in the email channel, but we've also got a really interesting, it's almost like as an ESP, we sometimes become the single system of record for the customer. It's like they almost our brands use the ESP as a CRM in many ways. We capture really interesting data sets of what's happening on site and what people are purchasing and how they're engaging with different marketing that brands are putting out there. And so it creates an opportunity for us to also trigger super aligned marketing in other channels. If you think of like your customer lifecycle and how you use email to grease the wheels, the email address of the individual customer is the key to identity in a lot of other places, right? You can build exact matches audiences with Google Ads, exact match audiences on Facebook. You have mailing addresses, you have mobile phone numbers. And so it becomes like, for Rejoiner, it becomes an opportunity to be a single, e-commerce CRM with which you can take action in any channel, not just email. So that's sort of like the bigger vision off in the distance.
It's very cool.
Yeah. How do you go through that process of developing the vision and, bringing it to reality? I'm a big fan in like understanding that long-term vision. I deal with owners all the time, and it's funny. We have a client right now that hasn't really thought about the long-term vision for their product and where they're going, versus I've got some other clients where, we've got a very clear 5-year vision and we're headed towards it. So how do you go through that process yourself of thinking about what's the future look like, defining it, and then communicating it to the team?
Yeah, like I'm not prescriptive at all. Like it's not like these ideas just pop into my head and I'm like, okay, like this is what we're going to go build. I'm a listener, right? Like it's about what the market is telling me. And the way that I stay dialed into that is I actually still manage personally like 5 or so of our more sophisticated client accounts. And it's like the real deal. Like I get on calls with them sometimes once or twice a week. I do performance reporting. We audit the accounts together. We roadmap out what they're going to do with the email channel. But the byproduct of being so close to the customer and doing that work, they also tell us what they need or what they're thinking, or other vendors that they're thinking about hiring, or other integrations that they need, or, hey, my boss is telling me we got to do this. So I'm managing the accounts, like as far as how they use our platform, but I use that as a qualitative research tool to inform what we need to do to remain competitive. So that's like some of the most important work that I do is like real deal, being close to the customer, not only making sure that they're getting the most out of our platform, but also you start to hear all these little nuggets, of information that help you plot the course for what else you could offer these folks to make your offering more compelling.
Yeah, it's great. Tony, anything?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's great that you're so hands-on. It goes back to how you said you were actually making the calls, and there's so much to gather. And I think that is an important aspect to stay tuned in.
Yeah.
How do you manage that, being as involved with also running the business? Like, how do you stay balanced?
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's like I question it frequently whether I should continue to do that, but then like we get some insight that's like, it's all about like uncovering secrets. Like it's like, what do we know that nobody else knows? And really the only way to get to those is to like be in the weeds with people figuring stuff out. Like that's what surfaces the opportunities, and like people bring all kinds of interesting use cases to the table. So it's like, it's like you have to balance it because I feel like it's so important to help us plot the course. But it's definitely not always easy, so it's like, I have, folks on our team who help me out with sort of the more, I call it like wood chopping, like preparing for those calls, being ready to talk about numbers and pulling numbers out of the various systems that we use for reporting. So I try to like get help with any of the time consuming operational stuff that I would need to do to be prepared to have those conversations. And so like kind of minimizes the time spent prior, and then I can focus on the qualitative side and the research side while I'm having the conversation. So I think it's really just about having like the right supports, so that it doesn't become the only thing that you're doing. It's like one thing, but you're supported, as far as time spent.
I love that little nugget that you kind of threw out there is, what do we know that nobody else knows? I think there's something around that of always, how do you take what you're doing day in, day out and be looking for those things that are unique insights. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and you get enough of those and you string them together on a 30-minute sales call and you got a business, really.
Yeah. What do you think some of the big challenges for your organization are, in the next year?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like, it goes back to that initial question about journey versus destination. And when you've been doing this stuff for as long as we have, the path forward kind of becomes clear, right? It's like, we know what we need to do. We know who we want to work with. We know how to do it. But we can't always go as fast as we want, right? So it's like, we all know what the bigger vision is, and we know like that there's a market need for what we're going to build, but like, how do you temper? Because we're still bootstrapped, right? We haven't raised any outside capital.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we grow the organization to support these bigger goals, but do so like with a bootstrap company, you can never be out of balance. Like, I can't have a team of 10 engineers with only a team of 4 customer support people.
Right.
Everything needs to grow in a linear fashion. And the organization has to be balanced. And so it's like, you have to manage some frustration on the team side where it's like, dude, like, we know what to do. Like, why aren't we going faster? And I think that is compounded by the fact that we feel like there's this amazing opportunity that has come out of this hugely negative situation with COVID, that like everything is about to change. And like,
right.
And the market is going to grow at an accelerated pace, and there's all this opportunity, and like, we need to be out there to capture it, So I really think the challenge for the next year is going to be like, A, how do we capture it? How do we go fast enough to capture it, but do so in a way that's like, we can retain the saneness of our business. Like, that's why a lot of our great people on our staff, like, they like that it's sane here. We're not like a venture-backed company that's trying to grow at some blistering pace, and like, we try to give people flexibility and live a great life outside of work. And it's not crazy, and like, I feel like it could get crazy if we really, try to move quickly to capture some of this new demand that's going to come into the market. So yeah, we'll figure it out, but it'll definitely be a challenge.
So how do you, and I hate to push you further on it, but how do you answer that question in a bootstrap business of moving faster? Because, transparently for me, every business wants to move fast, whether they're funded and they've got investors cracking the whip behind them, or bootstrapped. And it's like, well, if we don't move faster, we're not going to survive, or we're not going to take advantage of the marketplace. So you've identified the challenge. What would you say if you were pushed more on the solution to moving faster as a bootstrap company? It's not an easy one.
I honestly think it comes down to mindset and being in tune with the team, really. And it's like, what do we all want out of this? And once you understand that, you may come away and say, it's okay to go at this pace. We don't need to like blow it out. Like, naturally the market's going to grow. right? And if we can position ourselves to be in the sphere of options, we will get chosen by more people. We've got a great product already, right? And it's like it delivers on the promises we make, and it's priced competitively, and it's it has product market fit, right? We know that already. Does that change over time? Yeah, absolutely. But like, I do think it goes back to understanding the people that work for us and like serve our customers and make sure that our customers are happy and that build our technology. It's like, what do they want out of this whole deal? And that guides the decision. If enough people are on the team, like they're like, hell yeah, let's go for it. Like we're ready to like go crazy. Then like, that's what we'll do. But I think it's rooted in like having that understanding first.
Yeah, I think with that speed piece, I'm kind of curious for you. You've done this eight years. I've actually had my business 18 years. And what I can tell you is my risk tolerance has gone down a little bit, when I started the firm versus now. And so for you in 8 years, how does that fit into it too, of your ability to take risk? Because you can move faster, but you might have to take a lot more risk.
Totally. Yeah.
Has your risk tolerance changed as the business has evolved for you? Or are you still the cowboy maybe that you were when you started?
That's a really good question. I would say it hasn't really changed that much. I think once you start looking backwards and you're like, you start to cling to things you've done in the past, it prevents you from making the right decisions. Like you're afraid to make the right decisions in the future in some cases. So I kind of look at it like there is no risk, right? Because we've got this great team of people. We've got a great group of customers that'll vouch for us. We got a really good product that I believe has longevity into the future. And like super smart people can figure stuff out. So it's like, if it's a decision that we make that we can undo, there really is no risk. I think the riskier decisions are the ones that you can't undo,
right?
Like lowering your pricing or completely changing the market. I mean, even that you could go back on, but it's like most decisions can be undone. So in that regard, I feel like it's there's not a lot of risk in most cases.
Just have to make smart decisions at the end of the day.
Exactly.
I think for me, that's probably what's gotten better over the years. Is my first year in, and I was 22. Your ability to logically make decisions and think critically about things, it's a little bit different as you get further along.
Totally. I mean, I think it takes 10 years to figure out what you're doing. Like whether it's selling or whether it's building a team or whether it's building a piece of technology, it's like, like I said before, man, it just takes a long time.
It does. Very cool. Awesome. Well, I think it was a great conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh yeah. Thanks for having me.
To chat with us.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. And just everybody watching, I would encourage you guys to check out rejoiner.com. Take a look at the work that Mike and his team are doing. Mike, again, thank you so much. It was great.
You got it. Thanks, guys. Yeah, talk soon.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.